Have you ever heard of the charity business? I understand that talking about this might spark strong opposition and accusations of belittling the value of charitable activities. However, this is indeed a reality happening worldwide. While there are, of course, legitimate charities working with sincerity and compassion, some people exploit this noble cause to boost their reputation, solicit sympathy, or even profit from their so-called charitable activities. A chilling example of this is the following case. One day, Judy Moyes, a social worker in Sacramento, California, reported that one of her clients had gone missing. The client, Bert Montoya, was a 51-year-old homeless man who suffered from mental illness, making it impossible to verify his identity. Because of his condition, Bert lived in a shelter, and Judy worked diligently to uncover his true identity and help him apply for social welfare. In February, she found Bert a room at 1426 F Street in Sacramento. The residence was a white, two-story Victorian-style building with a large garden. The landlord rented out apartments on the first floor at low prices to struggling elderly people, including those battling alcoholism or mental illness. The landlord frequently donated money and food to charitable organizations, earning the trust of many social workers who were eager to place those in need in this house. After moving in, Bert gradually began to care for himself, and his health improved significantly. He even started engaging in simple conversations with others. Judy continued to visit Bert regularly, providing him with essential supplies and support. However, a few weeks earlier, the landlord claimed that Bert had gone to Mexico to visit family and would not be returning for a while. This raised Judy's suspicions. Later, Judy received a phone call from a man claiming to be Bert's brother-in-law, assuring her that Bert was staying with family and there was no need to worry. What struck Judy as odd was that the name this man gave did not match any records Judy had previously checked. Moreover, Bert had been in the U.S. for many years and had no known contact with his family. Considering Bert's ongoing mental health struggles and the landlord's evasive responses, Judy felt something was amiss and contacted the police. When the police arrived to investigate, the landlord insisted that Bert was away visiting relatives. Another tenant, John, confirmed the landlord's story. However, as the police were about to leave, John discreetly handed them a small note suggesting that the landlord might be involved in Bert's disappearance. It turned out that this was no ordinary boarding house. The landlord was Dorothea Puente, born in 1929 in California. Her early life was marked by unimaginable hardship. Both of her parents were alcoholics. Dorothea's father passed away when she was just 8, and her mother died the following year. She was then sent to an orphanage, where she endured severe abuse. This inhumane upbringing likely plunged her into deep depression. At 16, Dorothea moved to Olympia, Washington, to seek a better life. There she met Fred McFall, a soldier recently returned from World War II. The two fell in love at first sight and quickly married. However, not long after their wedding, Fred discovered Dorothea's troubling habit of fabricating elaborate lies about her life. She claimed, for instance, that she had survived the Bataan Death March at age 13, that her father was a high-ranking diplomat, and more. Dorothea constantly reinvented herself, creating layers of false identities. This destroyed trust in their marriage, and their love soon crumbled. Dorothea's first marriage lasted only 3 years. Of their 2 daughters, one was left in the care of McFall's parents, while the other was taken by McFall himself. Shortly after the divorce, Dorothea was convicted of forging checks to go on a shopping spree at a local mall. Following her arrest and subsequent release, she moved to San Francisco. In 1952, at the age of 23, Dorothea adopted the alias Taya Nalda, fabricating an Egyptian-Israeli Muslim background. She then married Axel Johnson, a sailor. Since Johnson spent long periods at sea, Dorothea often entertained other men at home using her husband's money. Her habits of heavy drinking and gambling soon became intolerable for Johnson, who eventually had her committed to a psychiatric hospital. Doctors diagnosed her as a pathological liar with severe emotional instability. Unsurprisingly, their 14-year marriage ended in divorce. After her second divorce, Dorothea found work as a nursing aide, caring for the elderly and disabled. She even gained some basic nursing knowledge during this time. By 1966, she began presenting herself as a devout, wholesome individual with a calmer temperament. Dorothea even converted her home into a free shelter for women, children, and elderly people in need. This charitable endeavor not only masked her dark past, but also earned her respect within the community. 2 years later, she married Roberto Puente, a man 19 years her junior. However, their marriage lasted only 16 months due to personality clashes. During this time, her shelter fell into financial trouble due to mounting debts. After the divorce, Dorothea decided to reinvent herself. She changed her wardrobe and style to look like a woman in her 50s or 60s. Using her newfound reputation and community connections, she relocated to a 3-story boarding house in Sacramento. The building contained 16 rooms designed specifically for elderly residents struggling with addiction, homelessness, or mental illness. These individuals only had to pay a nominal fee for meals and care provided at the boarding house. This humanitarian act earned her praise from social workers, and Dorothea became a celebrated figure in her community. But as the saying goes, no act of charity comes without ulterior motives. Dorothea's real intention was to exploit her vulnerable tenants for financial gain. Many elderly residents were unable to manage their own finances due to health or mental issues, so Dorothea assumed control over their welfare benefits. Each time she received their payments, she kept a substantial portion under the guise of covering living expenses, leaving only a small amount for the tenants. She also forged signatures to withdraw money from their bank accounts and siphon government benefits, social security checks, and public donations. All the stolen money went straight into her pockets. Over the years, Dorothea amassed a considerable fortune. Ironically, she used some of the stolen funds to donate to charities, nursing homes, and schools, further enhancing her public image. In 1976, at the age of 47, Dorothea married Pedro Montalvo, a 52-year-old tenant of hers. Tragically, or perhaps suspiciously, the marriage lasted only a week before Pedro suddenly passed away. Facing difficulties, Dorothea sought solace in bars. She had a particular preference for older, retired men, who were easier to charm and manipulate. Her goals were clear. She seduced them to steal their jewelry, credit cards, and welfare checks. 2 years later, she was charged with forging signatures to cash 34 Social Security checks. Dorothea received a 5-year probation sentence and was ordered to pay $4,000 in restitution. While on probation, she leveraged her nursing experience to secure private nursing jobs, continuing to care for elderly individuals. However, this role would soon become another means for her dark ambitions. In 1982, Dorothea Puente was convicted of robbery and illegally drugging individuals, receiving a 5-year prison sentence. However, due to good behavior, she was released after serving just 3 years. One of the conditions of her parole was that she could no longer manage boarding houses, care for the elderly, or assist others in applying for benefits. During her incarceration, Dorothea began a romantic correspondence with a man from Oregon named Everson Gillymouth, a 77-year-old retiree. Upon learning of Dorothea's impending release, Everson eagerly drove his Ford pickup truck to Sacramento, California, to meet her. Before leaving, Everson excitedly told his family that he planned to meet Dorothea in person after months of exchanging letters. If all went well, he intended to marry her. Once out of prison, however, Dorothea had no intention of abiding by her parole conditions. She returned to her previous activities, reopening her boarding house under a new guise. Over the next 3 years, she garnered widespread praise from social workers, who saw her as a kind-hearted woman providing shelter to society's most vulnerable. But one social worker, Judy, began to notice troubling inconsistencies. Judy reported her concerns to the police, and an investigation was launched. It was discovered that the man who had called Judy pretending to be Bert Montoya's brother-in-law had no knowledge of Bert. In fact, Dorothea had paid the man to impersonate a relative. Another tenant, John, secretly handed the police a note, claiming he had heard strange noises at night, as if something heavy was being dragged from the second floor to the first. He also mentioned a foul stench emanating from the upper levels and suspicious holes frequently appearing in the garden. Neighbors corroborated John's claims, reporting that Dorothea often hired a homeless alcoholic man to dig holes in her basement or backyard. This man would haul soil and debris away using a small truck. Curiously, after the holes were filled, the man disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, a terrible smell began wafting from Dorothea's property, especially on hot days, forcing neighbors to keep their windows shut. A social worker revealed that many homeless and impoverished individuals had been placed in Dorothea's care, but several had vanished mysteriously after only a short time. When questioned, Dorothea claimed that these people had left abruptly, unwilling to stay at the boarding house. The truth finally began to emerge on November 11, 1988, when social worker Judy reported her suspicions to the police. Officers arrived at Dorothea's residence and requested permission to dig in the garden. At 59 years old, Dorothea appeared cooperative, even offering to help dig. She grabbed a shovel and began working alongside the police. As they excavated, officers quickly unearthed scraps of cloth and what appeared to be dried flesh. Then, one officer made a chilling discovery, a human leg bone. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Dorothea's face grew pale as she began searching for a way to escape. She was apprehended on the spot and taken to the police station for questioning. Since there was no definitive evidence linking her to the remains at the time, Dorothea was released after giving a statement. However, the investigation didn't end there. A forensic team arrived at the scene and uncovered 7 additional bodies buried in the garden. Realizing the danger she was in, Dorothea fled immediately after her release. The media exploded with coverage, dubbing her property Dorothea's Garden of Bones and referring to her as the landlady of death. Public outrage erupted as law enforcement and other agencies faced harsh criticism for failing to recognize the disappearances and uncover Dorothea's true identity sooner. After evading law enforcement, Dorothea Puente settled in Los Angeles and quickly adapted to her new life. However, she soon resumed her old habit of drinking, driven by boredom. One evening, she met a retired man at a bar, and they struck up a lively conversation. During their chat, Dorothea discerned his financial situation and saw an opportunity. They exchanged contact information and agreed to meet the next day. When the man returned home, he recognized Dorothea as a wanted criminal after seeing her face on the news. He immediately alerted the police, who arrested Dorothea at her hotel just hours later. As details of the case emerged, families of missing individuals began coming forward, suspecting their loved ones might have fallen victim to Dorothea. Among these reports, police uncovered 2 particularly significant cases. The first involved Ruth Monroe, a 53-year-old woman who had lived in a rented room at Dorothea's boarding house for over a year before her death. An autopsy revealed the presence of codeine and acetaminophen in Ruth's system, but her death was initially ruled a suicide. Later, it was discovered that Dorothea had received $6,000 from Ruth shortly after her passing. Another suspected victim was 77-year-old Everson Gillymouth, a pen pal with whom Dorothea had corresponded romantically. When Everson vanished unexpectedly, Dorothea continued to collect his Social Security benefits for 3 years. She even forged a letter under his name to claim he was alive and well. In 1986, police found the decomposing body of an unidentified man inside a wooden box near a riverbank. This box was confirmed to have been custom-built at Dorothea's request. The remains were later identified as Everson through physical characteristics. The investigation revealed a disturbing pattern. Dorothea targeted elderly, homeless, sick, or neglected individuals, people who were often without family or whose disappearances would go unnoticed. Crucially, all her victims were recipients of Social Security benefits. Dorothea used sedatives to incapacitate them, forged their signatures, and continued collecting their benefits after their deaths. Police discovered a list at Dorothea's boarding house containing the names of each victim. It was revealed that she had been receiving approximately $5,000 monthly in stolen benefits and had spent $87,000 on cosmetic surgeries. Autopsies confirmed that the 7 skeletal remains unearthed at her property belonged to her tenants. Among the victims was Bert Montoya, the tenant whose disappearance had initially raised suspicions from social worker Judy. The oldest victim was 78, while the youngest was 51. High concentrations of flurazepam, a sedative, were found in all the remains, levels far exceeding therapeutic doses. Flurazepam is a drug used to treat anxiety, induce sedation, and relax muscles. However, it can be dangerous when combined with alcohol or other depressants and is often subject to abuse. When Dorothea was arrested and interrogated, she only admitted to charges of forgery and financial fraud, denying any involvement in the murders or the burials. She consistently portrayed herself as a charitable and caring individual. After several days of jury deliberations, the court convicted Dorothea Montalvo Puente of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. During her incarceration at the Central California Women's Facility, Dorothea authored and published a book titled Dorothea. She passed away in prison on March 27, 2011, at the age of 82. Throughout her life, she steadfastly denied any responsibility for the heinous crimes attributed to her. In 2011, a couple purchased the house that once contained 7 buried bodies for $215,000. By 2013, the property had become part of a guided tour organized by the Old Sacramento Historical Society, with tickets sold to the public. Once a nightmarish sight for lonely elderly individuals, the house was now open for visitors to explore. As the saying goes, the robe does not make the muck. True virtue and admirable actions are not solely about charitable deeds, but are also reflected in one's words, behavior, and ideals. Sometimes you don't need to perform acts of charity to show that you have a kind heart. On the other hand, not every charitable act is done with pure intentions. Even when you give, there may already be an expectation that others will owe you gratitude in return. And that concludes today's case. What are your thoughts? Feel free to share them in the comments below this video. Don't forget to support us by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. See you in the next one.